Hello, it's a Monday afternoon and I am at work taking a quick walk for a break. And I just wanted to also film this clip real quick about Nightbird Calling, which is the book that I read by Cathy Gohlke. But I want you to see this gorgeous nature preserve where I'm walking. So I'm going to flip the camera around and video the other way so you can see. This is just absolutely lovely, and I really enjoy walking here this time of year, although I do kind of have to dodge the bees a little bit because they definitely are finding much to pollinate. Okay, yeah, speaking of which, big bumblebee. Anyways, so I finished reading Nightbird Calling by Cathy Gohlke, which is set mostly in North Carolina, in a little town. I don't believe it's a real town, but it's based on a real kind of place. That was her idea for writing this book, but it's called No Creek. And it centers around the community there, but the heroine of the story, the main character, is a woman who is escaping an abusive marriage, which came on the heels of an abusive childhood and growing up with her father, although her husband sounded much worse than her father, whereas the father was more like emotional / spiritual abuse, if you want to call it that. The husband was definitely much more physical abuse. He was a real evil guy, even threatening to kill her on many occasions, and the sort of person who would make good on that threat. So yeah, not a good situation. She escapes to this little town of No Creek, North Carolina, where her great aunt Hyacinth lives, and finds refuge there. And the story goes on from there. So there is a lot in this story. There are a lot of heavy topics that are being dealt with. There is, of course, the abuse that I mentioned. There is rape. There is racism, anti-Semitism. Seems like there was, drunkenness, alcoholism. A lot of heavy things that are being dealt with in this story. So it's not one to be read lightly. However, I will say that Cathy Gohlke, the author, does not describe in detail these scenes. She just, like many of these things, are just spoken of, but not described in detail. Like, they happened and they're talked about, but they're not described. So you're not living in and wallowing in that misery. And there's plenty of, hopeful things and good things happening as well. So it deals with heavy matter, but it doesn't feel like a continuously heavy read in that sense. I really enjoyed it. The writing is fantastic. I love Cathy Gohlke's writing. This is the third book by her, and I've really enjoyed all of them. There was one story thread that wasn't a huge part of it. I was a little bit uncomfortable with it towards the end of the book and how that was dealt with. So it's just one little comment there. I mean, it's a complicated situation. It's a complex thing. The way that it turns out, you might not take any issue with it. I didn't really like how that particular aspect of the story went, and so I took down, a little bit for that aspect of it. And the story overall moved a little bit slow. So parts of it were very gripping and page-turning, but then other parts I could set it down and not come back to it for a couple of days, and it was fine. But overall, it was a very enjoyable read. Hello, it's Thursday evening, and I have finally finished a book. I've been reading it for more than a week, like a week and a half. So I finished reading In Search of a Prince by Toni Shiloh, and it was pretty good. It is, as I said before, kind of a spin-off of The Princess Diaries, but with a much more mature heroine, and is set in Africa rather than in Europe. So it is an imagined country in Africa. In the author's note at the end, Toni Shiloh explains that she wanted it to be in Africa, but not an actual place in Africa, so that she didn't make a lot of errors regarding the culture or language or whatever the situation. So it's an imaginary country in Africa off the west coast, and I loved the setting of it. That was really fun. And yeah, I liked how she took that storyline, that idea of the woman who finds out, you know, when she's grown, that she's really a princess and that she's heir to a throne across the world, and then she goes to assume the throne. I mean, when you're dealing with a premise like that, obviously there's not a lot that's realistic about it, so we won't use that as a basis for the for judging the book. So just take it for granted. So don't expect it to be like a fully realistic story, but it was enjoyable to read. It did move a little bit slowly. It took me over a week and a half to read it. And granted, I had a lot going on in my life, and I had another book or two in process along the way, but still, it wasn't like I read a little bit every day, but it wasn't like, oh, I want to find out what happens, probably because, you know, I kind of figured how the story was going to go. Maybe that was part of it. And it didn't move very quickly through that, but it was good how she unfolded the story. I liked the main character and her personality, how she was very down to earth, but also very capable. And that aspect of it was very realistic. Like, she had been a middle school civics teacher, so she had a stronger understanding than many of us would have about government and politics, and was able to apply that to her new role. And so that was good. There are a lot of faith elements. Obviously, it's a Christian fiction, so it's a clean book. All in all, it was a very good book, and I enjoyed it, and I would give it 3.5 stars. I liked it, and I'll probably at some point read the next book. I think it's a duology about her friend. I believe the next one is about her friend Iris, I think her name is, which will be interesting. And I love the cover of it. The cover is so beautiful. I love that dress. Anyway, so it was a fun read. And so now I'm going to finish this one. So I'm going to see if I can finish this in the next 15-20 minutes and make another one. Okay. I finished this one. And can I just say, I knew this, but it was confirmed on rereading it. Edith Wharton knows how to pack a punch. This book hits you in the gut. And I knew what was going to happen in the story, and I won't tell you. I knew what was going to happen, but when it happened, it was still a nail-biting moment. So, what to say about this story? Well, Ethan Frome and Age of Innocence, both by Edith Wharton, both deal with infidelity or potential infidelity and the consequences thereof. And also, when she's writing in both of these books, particularly in this one, all throughout the book, she seems to be writing very sympathetically towards the people who are, let's just say, on a track to commit adultery. But they don't. Well, I mean, depends on how you define it. But there's definitely emotional involvement on both sides and all that stuff. But she writes it in such a way that you are sympathetic to them because of the situation in which they find themselves. But also, as you're reading it, you realize that the couple that is married, Ethan Frome and his wife Zena, they are both flawed characters. Like, Ethan Frome is very weak. He kind of just, like, lets life happen to him, and he just, you know, puts up with whatever happens and kind of, like, muddles through but he doesn't seem to have a great deal of strength of character. And Xena is just self-centered and narcissistic as all get out. And so it sets up this scenario where not even the best of people would want to be married to her, honestly, let alone someone who is of a weaker nature and, you know, he's always, I don't know, kind of put upon, I guess. And then in comes this fresh, younger, sweeter character who is maybe similar to Ethan Frome in that she also lacks a certain strength of character, but she is at the same time an unfailingly kind person, and she has been dealt a hard hand in life, much like Ethan Frome has, but in her position, there's really not much that she can do about it. But at the same time, like, one of her options was working in a store, and that didn't work out for her because she was just she wasn't strong enough or hardy enough. I mean, how hard is it to be a clerk in a store? I don't know, whatever. But then she came to help Ethan and his wife, but she did well enough. I mean, she did whatever she was asked to do, but she just didn't do it very well. But being in the country air, you know, made her stronger, so she was a stronger person. Up until the end, between her and Ethan Frome, she had the stronger character. And I guess even in the end, you could say that hers was the stronger character because hers was the decision at the end of the book. That is kind of like the culminating point. I won't say what all it was because I don't want to spoil it. And you definitely, this is one, I don't mind spoilers, but this is when you don't want to be spoiled. So anyway, it was still an emotional punch. And Edith Wharton just really, really writes really well. You can feel the tension in a room, like you can cut it with a knife just reading about it. And she doesn't use a lot of words. This is one of my favorite types of narration. She doesn't use a lot of words. She doesn't tell, she shows. And she shows very vividly with the words that she does use. And this is a shorter story, but it is a punchy story. I say punchy because, like, it packs a punch. So it's very good. I can understand why people would not like this book, because if you're the sort of person who doesn't like the characters in a story, like if the characters in the story are not good people or likable people, and that bothers you and that makes you dislike a book, then you will not like this one. They're not lovable characters. They are more flawed than they are good in many ways. And it may seem, because the story is, like I said, about a couple that is on the track to adultery and, you know, gets to the first stage of it at least. Maybe the second stage. I don't know. I don't know what the stages are, but, you know, even though it's about that, it's not glorifying it or honoring it, even though, as you know, it's describing all of this stuff throughout the book. They're longing for each other and, you know, the things that made them more compatible, if you want to look at it that way, than the original couple who was married. It's not glorifying that at all. It's not. And I don't want to say anymore because I don't want to spoil it, because you have to read it knowing nothing. I don't say that about many books, but this one, it's true. So it's actually really a pretty powerful story. And maybe this is one that I should do a deep thoughts video about, so that I can talk spoilers for other people who may have read it and want to chat about it more. Because they're kind of like some things that I really want to say, but I don't want to spoil it. So we'll leave it at that. And so I have finished that this week. Yay! So this is for Shorty September, and it also is on my list of books that I want to reread this year. So making progress on that. I think I have 4 or 5 books left there. I don't know if I'll get to all of them this year, but I'm making good progress. So I have no idea what I'll read next because I've now finished all of the things. So I think I need to pick up something in series September. This fits for series September because it is the first of a duology. So that goes with series September also, In Search of a Prince. And we'll see what is on my stack. I don't even remember. I'll pick up something. But if I don't have any more clips for this week, I will say so long, farewell, adieu. Have a lovely day.